Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines. It is time for another ranking video from the manufacturer's releases, as NG Models have just announced their latest releases for August a couple of days ago, and there is another substantial batch of models here. We've got 24 400 scale models and a couple of 200 scales, which I'm not going to talk about. I only care about 400 scale. So NG's last month was pretty good, I thought. It was quite a diverse range of models, but this month's, I have to say, is not quite as diverse. And NG does seem to have months where they don't shake up the molds a lot, or maybe they've just got so many molds nowadays that they don't get to use them all each month. And so this month, I have to say, I'm not so excited by what I'm seeing. But let's get into that in a second and look through the releases. As always, if you're enjoying the video, subscribe to the channel, give it a like. Check me out at yesterdaysairlines.com and on Instagram and Facebook at YesToAirlines. It's always appreciated. And now, without further ado, let's get on and have a look at what NG have got for us this month. Okay, so I'm going to go through these releases in a similar way to the way that I do with other brands. Going to start with the Airbuses and then slip through the Boeings, and then anything else that's left brings up the rear. So we're going to begin with a pair of China Southern A319s, and it's good, I guess, to see that NG are beginning to get into the swing of using their new baby bus molds, and that means that there's a lot of standard kind of airlines to get through, and China Southern is, I guess, a really standard kind of airline, albeit one whose livery I really enjoy. So this month there's a couple of offerings. First up, there is an A319 Neo, registered B329 Yankee, and then there's a standard A319 without sharklets, B6205, and the livery is the same on both of these. Obviously, these are some of the very first A319s that have been produced by NG Models. When it comes to China Southern, though, there have been previous A319s. You'll be enormously surprised to hear. Having said that, the only A319 Neos that have been released at all in 400 scale up to this point have been a couple from Panda Models, one of which did include China Southern. So it isn't the first Neo A319 released either, because Panda have got there slightly before them. In fact, I own the Panda release and it's a really nice model. This one I'm sure will also be nice. And you know, it goes without saying that I think the NG baby bus molds are fine. Actually, probably, you know, maybe a tiny bit inferior to the Panda ones because of the engine fans. I really like the way the engine fans look on the Panda molds. But generally, this will be a nice release, I'm sure. In terms of the A319 CEO, there have actually been not as many as you might think releases of these in the past. There's been a couple by Aero Classics from a long time ago, and there's been 3 versions from jcwings. So it's a little surprising that JC and Gemini have never actually gone down this path, but I guess JC don't release China Southern, do they? So it would have to have been Gemini, and that's probably why not. So again, the HYJL ones are quite rare. They were produced in a very small number. I happen to own one of those, but they're not easy to find. So I guess in many ways, these two China Southern A319s is going to be the first time that you can easily get your hands on one without having to go off searching, because even the recent Panda Neo has not really appeared in the West. But then again, how many Western collectors are really collecting China Southern? I don't know, probably not that many. So in my universe, these are both going to be models that there's some temptation that I could get them, but they're not high priorities for me. I shouldn't think they are for a lot of other collectors out there in the West either. So I'm going to put these both into the workhorse territory. I'm sure they'll be really quite nice, and if you really like A319s and China Southern, then this will be a good combination for you. Next up, there are a pair of Aeroflot A320 Neos. And these, you know, I'm really in two minds about these. Obviously, my thoughts about these releases are somewhat coloured by what Russia has been doing in Ukraine, and The two releases that we've got here, one of them is carrying the old leased VP Reg, in this case VP BSN, and the other one is carrying a Russian registration. And as you may know, all of the aircraft that were leased have now been re-registered inside Russia and basically stolen from the lessors. And yeah, I'm not sure about releasing an RA Reg version for these reasons. I think it's in a little bit of bad taste given the current situation in Ukraine, I have to admit. Now, I'm sure that the releases will look nice. I'm sure that they're going to be really nice models. I really like the old, this Aeroflot livery is very attractive. So I'm a little bit confused about what to do with these ones. I'm tempted to put the VP Reg one up in the High Flyer because that's a model that I'd be willing to buy. It's before the Ukrainian war. But I'm really not overly impressed that NG have released an RA Reg version. I know it may seem small and I'm perhaps cutting hairs, but that just seems in bad taste considering that the aircraft only exists because of the Ukrainian invasion. So I'm going to put that one down in Gas Guzzler. I wouldn't buy that one. I don't really think it's the right thing to be doing, releasing Aeroflot aircraft that have been re-registered. Maybe I'm splitting hairs, but that's just the way I feel about it. It doesn't feel right to me. So last of the baby buses this month is an A321 with sharklets, and this one's American Airlines. It's in these flagship Valor colours, which are quite a nice scheme. It's not the first time NG have released an American A321 in special colours. They've already produced the stand-up cancer model just recently, which turned out really nice, and they've also released the standard colours. So this model will go really well with those, I think. I think it'll be super popular. I'm sure it'll look really nice because, let's face it, the NG A321 does look great. And certainly, I'm looking here and I'm comparing the stand-up cancer version that Aero Classics did with the stand-up cancer version that NG did, and there's no comparison. Even though the molds are quite similar, just the finish, the undercarriage, the detailing, so much better on the NG version. So this one, I think, is really nice. It doesn't fit in my criteria. It doesn't stop me from thinking that this is a Supersonic release. However, I'm going to slap this one straight up there into Supersonic. I think it'll be a big seller, and I think it'll be a really nice, well-done release. Okay, on to the Airbus wide bodies, and we've got a couple of China Eastern A330s. Now, China Eastern A330s, they just seem so common in 400 scale that it's almost a bit of a joke. The livery is obviously really tedious and lots of people hate it. That doesn't stop me from having got a couple, but if I look how many China 7 A330s have been made over the years, 59. There have been 59 different China 7 A330s. Now, there have been a lot of special schemes amongst that, I admit. But even so, this month's releases are just, one of them is just in the vanilla scheme, B300Q, and they already just released a Series 200 in that scheme not long ago. And the other one is in this special Snickers special scheme, which is actually not the first time this model's been made either. It has been made previously by Panda Models, and is a model that I actually own myself. The Panda version is super nice. It does seem Panda have annoyingly lost access to that mold now, which is a real shame because it is a super nice version that they made. But do we need another one? I don't know. I guess there is an endless supply of potential purchases for China Eastern A330s, it seems, because there's just so many of them are released. Aviation 400 made a vanilla version of the scheme just recently themselves. So yeah, I mean, and they're not exciting, and they're not new. So these are both going to go in the workhorse. I'm sure they'll be nice, but yeah, nothing special going on there from my perspective. Next up, there is a couple of Finnair A330s, OH Lima Whiskey Echo and Lima Whiskey Lima, and Whiskey Lima is wearing the, I'm sure I'm not going to say it correctly, but the Marimekko Cuvette scheme, which basically consists of a series of conjoined circles at the rear fuselage. I think they're circles, or maybe they're not quite circles, maybe they're hexagons. But either way, some conjoined shapes in the rear fuselage. Neither of these are also particularly new releases. They've been made lots of times. In fact, you're looking in the database, if you include these NG versions, there are 12 Finnair A350s that have been made. Everyone's getting on the game here pretty much. You've got Phoenix, jcwings, and Gemini have all been there. The only one that hasn't actually is Aviation 400, which surprises me somewhat. So there are multiple versions of these. jcwings has been getting in the game producing some Christmas colour versions actually, which is interesting. But Phoenix has made the standard scheme, so has JC, and Gemini have made the Marimekko version, so have Phoenix. So these aren't new. I really like the NG A350. I think it's going to be, well, it is good. It is probably the best A350, technicalities, in my opinion, slightly ahead of the Aviation 400, which isn't available. So in that sense, you might be more interested in these models since there is an AV400 version of them. But the Finnair livery, the standard scheme, it's just awful. Again, it's like the China Eastern one, except they just made the titles larger. It doesn't really sell it for me. It's their worst scheme ever that Finnair have had. And for me, that means that this one has to go into the workhorse territory. It's going to be nice, but it's just boring. But the Marimekko scheme is slightly more interesting. I'm going to put that one up in high flyer territory. But again, they're not really exciting me because they've been made before. There's nothing particularly new here. NG are covering territory that others have already approached. So that's a look at all the Airbuses this month. There is a decent number of Boeings that are also being made here. And we'll begin with the smallest versions of these, which is the 737-600. Now, NG have only so far announced, I think it is just that single there were some closed-bound ones, and there's a few. They're producing one or two a month, it seems, and so far they've released, or at least they've announced, none of them, I think, have been technically released onto the market yet, but they've announced the Canadian version, the Aeroflyer, I think it was, wasn't it? And they have announced the two fly closed-bands from last month, and also the Midwest hybrid as well at the same time. And the latest ones are a pair of Air Europa 737-600s. These are weird choices, in my opinion. Weird choices. Because Air Europa was not a major operator of the 737-600. In fact, I really had to even search to find that they had any. And what they really did, it seems, is lease a couple from SAS. And they only have this hybrid scheme where you've got the non-white base colours. So it's a really odd choice for a 737-600. I'm not sure why NG had decided on these two. One of them wears this peppycar.com stickers, which are really not attractive. But then again, the Air Europa scheme is awful as well. Air Europa is an airline that's always annoyed me, because it started as part of Air Europe, had the beautiful Air Europe scheme, and then since then it's just had gradually worse and worse and worse schemes. You'd expect an airline from Spain to have real vibrancy and colour, and instead it's just really, really awful schemes they had. The current one is just blue and white. I mean, it's tedious as. So for me, these are not exciting. I don't know why they really released them. The mold's great, but yeah, they're not exciting me. I think they're odd releases and not ones that I'm remotely interested in. I'm going to put these in gas gutters, not because of the mold, but just because, yeah, really weird and unusual and not particularly interesting releases, in my opinion. Next up, however, we've got a couple of 737-700s, which are a bit more interesting. They are both Alaska Airlines examples. One is a passenger version, N618AS, and one is in the Alaska cargo colours, and that's N625AS. And again, looking through the releases here, these aren't the first time that these have been made. Gemini has made both of these before. The passenger version they made on their old mould in 2019, and more recently they've made the cargo version in 2021 on the newer jcwings mould, which I'm not an enormous fan of though. Looking at the pictures, actually looks like it came out okay. These ones are obviously better. The mould's better. The NG mould is super nice, and I like the new Alaska scheme. In fact, I've always liked Alaska's liveries. They've always been really classy and nice with Chester on the tail. So I think these two, again, will be popular, and I'm sure they'll turn out really nice. I really like the mould, even though they've been made before. They've been made on inferior moulds. So I think these ones have got a lot going for them. I'm going to put the cargo version. Actually, I'm gonna make Supersonic. I think that's more interesting, and it's got a story behind it around the way Alaska are operating in Alaska with their cargo fleet. And I'm going to put the passenger version in the high flyer territory because it's super nice. Perhaps not quite as interesting to me as the cargo version. Next up, we've got some more Norwegian. They had a Norwegian 787 last month announced, and now this month we've got a 737-800. And someone at NG is obviously a fan of Queen because both of these are carrying Freddie Mercury on the tail. This one, the 737, has an Irish registration, EIFVX, but it is essentially the same scheme as was worn by the 787. Actually, surprisingly, haven't been that many Norwegian releases, and certainly not just standard 800s. There have been a few from Aero Classics using the old Panda mould, which must be quite old now. Let me have a look. They were released in 2015, so they're really old. And they made people like Greta Garbo and a couple of special tails and things like that. But otherwise, there hasn't been a lot. Even Phoenix haven't actually made any. jcwings haven't made any. There's been a Gemini Max, which was nice, but that was actually, I think, not even a real scheme. And yeah, surprising gap in the market here for Norwegian. And probably potentially an easy way for NG to make a series of models here, seeing as the scheme is the same across all of them. It's just the tail changing. Not an airline that particularly excites me, but I can see this one's got a lot of potential. It will look great. The mold's awesome, obviously. And yeah, considering the rather dearth of Norwegian releases, this one I think deserves to be high fly material. Now, I was just talking in the Phoenix video about the Phoenix's love for Skymark, but it doesn't seem like Phoenix is alone because NG have also suddenly developed a real love for Skymark. I'm not really sure why that is. I guess they do have colourful schemes, and Japan is an important market. Maybe that's enough because all of a sudden, in the last couple of months, NG have now announced 3 Skymark 737s, and perhaps this is part of NG's continuing assault, if you like, on Phoenix's market share, because they released the previous Pokemon colours and now they're releasing the second Pokemon colours, and they're also at the same time releasing the standard colours. Now, I'm not an enormous Pokemon fan. I complained in the Phoenix one that they're going to make a mess of it because the mould isn't particularly good and they generally get the copy windows in the wrong place. And certainly if you're going to compare the two, then there's no sensible reason why you shouldn't be buying the NG over the Phoenix version unless you just don't really care. So it's interesting, they're going to be out at the same time. I previously wasn't overly thrilled by the Phoenix version, but yeah, on the NG mould, this scheme has the potential to look much better. And yeah, suddenly I feel like it will look quite cool, when previously I was thinking, oh, it's going to look rubbish on the things, but I don't really understand why that is, other than I've got a lot of faith that NG will do a good job producing the livery. So for me, I'm going to put this one up into high flyer. I'm actually interested to see how something's going to turn out with such an interesting livery. Now, the standard version, I'm nowhere near as excited about. Skymark has got a pretty boring livery. It's been made by Gemini previously on the JC mould a couple of times, actually. And yeah, it doesn't really excite me, the scheme. I'm going to make that one just a workhorse. It kind of, I'm sure it'll be fine. And if you like Japanese airlines, then it's probably a good purchase, but not particularly exciting from where I'm sitting. So there's one more 737 this month, and this one is probably for me the most interesting, and that's because I do like Indonesian airlines, and it's got an interesting scheme. This is Papa Kilo Lima Foxtrot Golf wearing the Dreamliner colours. It's a 737-900ER, and it has been made once before by Gemini a long time ago on their old model, way back in 2008 actually. So that's interesting, and it's actually a model I've never been able to pick up. It actually looks like Gemini did a good job. I actually don't hate that old mould, but I've never been able to get it, and now I'm super excited to be able to add this NG version, because obviously the 737 engine make is great. I've got a decent Lion Air fleet, and I've even stooped to getting quite a large number of the Phoenix versions, for my shame. This one will look really good with those. It's a nice scheme, and it's good to see that NG are not just picking, modern or contemporary ones. I'm not sure this scheme actually still exists in the Lion Air fleet, but it's going to be a great model. I'm putting this one up in Supersonic. Okay, that's the 737s over with, so we have only a single 757 this month. And one of the obvious things about this month's releases is that we're missing quite a few of the molds that I personally find more interesting. There are no TriStars, there are no 747 SPs. There are very little in the way of anything before 2010, and there's only a single 757. Even this one is a modern 757. And this one is in the colours of Asia Pacific Airlines. It's registered November 757 Quebec Mike. And I didn't know a lot about Asia Pacific Airlines. When I first looked at it, I thought, not another cargo 757. But now I've looked into this a bit, and actually I'm a bit more interested now. They've been around for some time, since '98, and they generally flying freight services in the Marshall Islands and the Federated States of Micronesia, exporting tuna and bringing in post and other freight. And actually is a much more interesting story. It looks like they've got 4 757s, which come from a varied group of airlines, a couple of them are ex-Russian. And yeah, this model actually I think is going to be surprisingly good. I'm actually have taught myself into being interested in it. So previously I was thinking, not another cargo 757. But actually, I quite like this one. I've decided I'm going to put this one up in the high flyer territory. The livery isn't the best in the universe, but it's some colour. It's nice enough, and it's got a cool story. So yeah, it's a high flyer, and it's nice to see, not a major obvious airline. This month is not particularly innovative, I feel, in terms of the airline choices. China Southern, Aeroflot, American, China Eastern, Finnair, Alaska. I mean, they're not particularly unusual airlines to be making. So it's good to see NG occasionally making a slightly more unusual airline, because they used to make a lot more smaller and unusual airlines, and they've kind of lessened that now. And an illustration of that is that the next 3 models in the release list are all Lufthansa cargo, which I've already, I think, moaned on previous videos about the Lufthansa scheme, how I find it to be boring. And again, NG here are not ploughing a new furrow in any way. Gemini has released a flaps up and a flaps down version of the standard scheme. Herpa has released one of these special colour versions. I think it was the Flying 100 CO2 neutral one. And that was using the same wings. That was using the jcwings mould as well. So they're both really nice models. NG's 777 is probably its weakest mould, and I don't think it's quite as good as the jcwings version. So it's not a great livery. It's it's not exciting me. These ones are screaming workhorse. I'm sure they'll be nice enough, and if you really like Lufthansa cargo, it would make sense to get all 3, so you've got kind of the set. But yeah, it's not exciting. It's not at all exciting. I look at these and I think, not exciting. So I'm going to put all these into workhorse. And if you thought Lufthansa cargo wasn't exciting, wait until you get to the next one, which is a company called CGM Air Cargo. They can't even give themselves an interesting bloody name. So CGM is a relatively recent airline, and it's got a couple of 777 freighters, and it's painting them in what is one of the all-time most boring liveries that any airline has ever created. It makes the China Eastern scheme look exciting, because it's basically just got their titles on it and a really nothing tail logo. I guess if I did collect cargo airlines, I'd still be interested in this maybe, but thank God I don't, because I don't want to feel obligated to buy the most boring releases that are made, and this one is super tedious. I've already said that I don't think the mould is the best 777 on the market. This livery is one of the worst liveries ever made, if you can indeed call it a livery. Absolutely zero effort being put in there. just not exciting at all. I'm going to put this in the gas guzzler territory as well. Again, not necessarily because of the model, but because it's a really boring choice. It's just not interesting me at all. Two models left on the list here, and only one of those is a Boeing, and that is a United Airlines 787-10. And I first saw this release, I thought, oh, cool, United Airlines 787, that'll turn out nice. And then I looked at who's made a United Airlines 787-10, and lo and behold, NG have already made one. They made one N12010, and that was made in 2020. So 2 years later, they're making N13013. And in the meantime, Gemini have also made N12010, so they're using the jcwings mold, obviously, which is a great mold. The NG mold's also a great mold. So this will be the third excellent 787-10 in this scheme. So when I first saw it, I thought it was the first time anyone's doing it. I thought, oh wow, this is going to be a really cool Supersonic release. But now I see that they've already made one before. It's just another workhorse model, isn't it? It's just another workhorse. Nothing bad. It's going to be great, but it's not interesting. They've already made it previously, and so have Gemini. Okay, and following up, the last model of all of this set is another one from North Korea, and obviously, as you probably know, Chinese manufacturers cannot get enough of Air Koryu, even though North Korea is such an incredibly heinous place. China is much better, I guess, so they don't care about that sort of thing too much. So it's an Air Koryu TU204. I have got some Air Koryu models, so it's not like I don't buy them just because it's a complete disaster of a country. But this aircraft, P633, in the latest scheme with the very thin pinstripe cheat line and the wavy flag, has been made before. It's been made by Panda. It was made in quite recently. It was announced in 2021, but I get the feeling the model actually probably came out in 2022. I'm not sure, but it's been done before. This is going to be exactly the same aircraft, exactly the same livery. The mould from NG is slightly better, but not so much better that I would be going out there getting this in its place. So, yeah, they obviously think there's more sales potentials. There's a good chance that they had this in their release plans before Panda came out with their version, I guess. But it isn't exciting. It's not exciting at all. It's it'll be lovely. And I actually don't have the Panda version, so I guess theoretically I could get this one, but it's not a model that I'm desperate to be getting. So again, it's just another workhorse model, really. And for me this month, that is the problem. When I look through the releases here, there's not a lot of uniqueness. I guess NG are consolidating their position in 400 scale. They're trying to directly compete with others. So they're doing a lot of the same subjects, and they generally do them well. But it isn't interesting. So China Southern A319s, China Eastern A330s, Finnair A350s, Alaska 737s, Skymark 737s, Lufthansa Cargo 777s, United 787s, Air Koryu TU204s. All of those have been done before. And if you're looking for uniqueness this month, you're struggling a little bit. Yeah, no one's made these Aeroflot Neos. No one's made that exact American A321 or that exact Norwegian 738. But really, when you're looking at these, there's not a lot of the sort of thing which used to make me really excited to see NG releases, like that Asia Pacific 757, something that's different, it's unusual, and they're going to produce great models. So it's a little bit disappointing, in my opinion, this month. Obviously, there are no TriStars or SPs. They don't have to have those every month for it to be a good release month, but it helps. But the rest of the choices, yeah, it's very much, yeah, not very exciting. And even though NG has a collection of great molds, I'm still going to put models in the gas guzzler if I think they're going to be really, really boring or just kind of pointless, like these Air Europa hybrids. So that's just the way I see it. I know people think I favour NG a lot. I don't think I do, particularly, and this month, clearly shows that nobody is beyond criticism. Hopefully next month will be a bit more varied and a bit more interesting. So let's see what that brings. Anyway, guys, thanks very much for watching. As always, keep an eye out for my next video. Like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys later. Have a good one. See you next time.